Okay, picture this. It's July 1518, the city of Strasbourg. A woman walks out into a street and just starts dancing. But this isn't a party. This is the beginning of a terrifying plague, where dancing becomes a spectacle of horror, and for many, a literal death sentence. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a horror novel, right? But this was a real, documented historical event. For weeks, hundreds of people were trapped in a dance they couldn't stop. So, what on earth was going on here? And look, the scale of this is just mind boggling. We're not talking about a few people getting carried away. At its peak, historical records say that as many as 400 people were caught up in this bizarre, totally involuntary dance marathon. So how does something this massive even begin? Well, to get to the bottom of this, we have to go back to where it all started. And it all started with just one person, a woman named Frau Troffea. She's the key to this whole mystery. The scene must have been so incredibly strange. One day, Frau Troffea just steps outside and begins to dance. There's no festival happening, no musicians playing, nothing, just silence. And she doesn't stop. Not for hours, but for days. She just keeps moving, as if her own body was a stranger to her. So what starts as this really weird, isolated incident, well, it doesn't stay that way for long. Soon, it explodes into a citywide crisis. Frau Troffea wasn't dancing alone for long. Her strange, frantic movements started to spread, almost like a virus. And the speed of this thing was absolutely terrifying. Within just 1 week, over 30 other people had joined her. By the end of the first month, the streets were filled with hundreds of people, all twisting and jerking in this relentless, unstoppable dance. You have to understand, this wasn't some joyful celebration. The dancers were victims. Witnesses said they were crying out in pain, begging for help. Their bodies were moving completely against their will. They were trapped in a physical nightmare, unable to rest, their feet bleeding, their bodies just collapsing from the strain. And the physical toll was just brutal. People danced until they literally dropped. Many died from pure exhaustion, from strokes, from heart attacks. Some historical accounts say that at the plague's peak, as many as 15 people were dying every single day from this relentless movement. It was a plague in every sense of the word. Now, with this crisis spiraling out of control, the city authorities decided they had to do something. But their solution was based on medieval medicine, and it would turn out to be tragically, catastrophically wrong. So the physicians at the time, they came up with this diagnosis: hot blood disease. They genuinely believed the only way to cure it was for people to dance the fever and the heat out of their systems. So their prescription was not rest, it was more dancing. I'm not kidding. Acting on this advice, the city actually built wooden stages. They hired professional musicians and dancers to keep the beat going, thinking it would help people dance it out. But instead of curing the plague, they turned a crisis into a public spectacle, which just fanned the flames and pulled even more people into the madness. So eventually, after weeks of horror, the plague began to fade away. But the question that haunted everyone was, what in the world just happened? For centuries now, historians and scientists have been trying to make sense of this mass insanity. And 3 main theories have emerged over time. Was it a supernatural curse? A punishment from St. Vitus? Or maybe it was physical? Was it poisoning from a fungus called ergot that grows on rye bread and can cause spasms and hallucinations? Or was the poison not in their food, but in their minds? And that last one brings us to what is now the most widely accepted modern theory: mass psychogenic illness. You might know it as mass hysteria. It's this bizarre but real phenomenon where a whole group of people under extreme, collective stress can start to show shared physical symptoms, even when there's no actual underlying disease. The mind literally makes the body sick on a massive scale. And when you look at what life was actually like in Strasbourg back in 1518, this theory starts to make a whole lot of sense. The city was on the absolute edge. They were suffering from brutal famines, constant disease, and just crushing poverty. People were desperate, deeply superstitious, and living in a state of constant fear. It was the perfect storm, the perfect fertile ground for a psychological outbreak. So what does this bizarre 500-year-old story really tell us? Well, it's way more than just a historical curiosity.
It's a pretty chilling look at the incredible power of the human mind and that deep, sometimes terrifying connection between our psychological stress and our physical reality.
The dancers did eventually stop, and the city recovered. But the lesson of the dancing plague is absolutely timeless. It's this stark reminder that when an entire community is pushed past its psychological breaking point, the results can be unpredictable, visible, and just utterly terrifying.
And that really leaves us with the final, unsettling thought. The dancing plague of 1518 is an extreme answer to that question. It shows us that under the right, terrible combination of fear and stress, that line we think exists between the mind and the body can completely break down.